All right, so we're gonna get started here. We have, about an hour to kind of go through all this stuff. We are gonna move, a little quickly in some points, but there'll be a brief Q&A at the end, and you can also submit any questions you may have, and we can get back to you at a later time. So what you're seeing right now, you got some hashtags and handles there for our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We're at Cognac USA and hashtag Cognac Connection. Feel free to use any of these when you're posting anything about cognac related, and we'd love to see what people are doing with that. And yes, if you have any questions, just submit them to the Q&A, and we'll try and get that stuff answered for you today. All right, so let's get started. We're going to talk about some history. I'm going to taste 8 different cognacs today. I'm going to make a cocktail. There'll be a few different polls throughout the webinar today to answer a few questions, and we'll go over that. Just a brief introduction to who I am. My name is Adam Robinson. I live in Portland, Oregon. I am a Cognac educator. I have been for, I guess, the last almost 4 years now. I got into cognac because I won a cocktail competition about 5 years ago, and I've traveled to the region a few times, and I've really just, over the years, really just fell in love with cognac, the region, the spirit, and just kind of everything involved. So, all right, let's get started. Next slide, please. That was just a brief little video of the region of Cognac. As you can see, it's very beautiful and rich history there. We're going to put a little poll up here for you guys to answer. So for the first one, it's going to be the youngest age in there. Second question, there are 6 crus as opposed to 5. True for the Uni Blanc, counts for 98% of the grapes, and the best glass is actually not a snifter, but that's traditionally what a lot of people use. All right, we can go on to the next slide, please. So first up, we're just going to talk a little bit about cognac. As you can see from the map here, Paris up top there, cognac is going to be down about 7 o'clock. You're looking at it like a clock. It's about 2.5 hours from Paris on the high-speed train. It's kind of maritime, coastal climate. You'll see it's pretty close to Bordeaux there. It's about, about 60 kilometers north of there. And you can go on to the next slide. So Cognac is the 4th largest vineyard area in France. It's the 2nd largest wine producer. It encompasses a total of 10% of the total French vineyard area. It's about 187,000 acres. The whole region, there's a lot of different industries involved with cognac production, whether it's glass making, print making, label making, and so it employs not just winemakers, not just distillers. There's over 17,000 direct jobs related to the cognac industry. And one interesting thing about the 187,000 acres, where the BNIC is actually going to increase the number of the size of the vineyards in the next year. They're going to go up to about, I believe it's about 220,000 acres. So production is increasing, and the need for more vineyards is there. So it's a good thing. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So one thing that's interesting about cognac compared to a lot of other spirits is the kind of separation of production methods. You have over 4,000 wine growers, over 100 distillers, and close to 300 different merchants. And one thing that's interesting, you know, that I always find fascinating about cognac is, you know, some of the producers are just distillers. Some of the producers are just winemakers, and some of the producers are just cognac houses that purchase from the distillers. And it's pretty interesting. There are a few houses that do all three. Some might distill, some might blend, and but it's unlike other industries like, say, bourbon, where generally speaking, from grain to glass, it's all going to be the same company. So in cognac, there's a definitive separation of the processes for the production, which I can't think of really any other spirits, you know, where it's quite so separated, and I always found that to be quite fascinating. We can go on to the next slide. Cognac history. So, you know, wine has been made in the Cognac region since the 1st century. They've always, you know, France has always been known for its great wines. You know, going into the Dutch used to come down to France to pick up the wine. In addition to wine, there was also a lot of salt marshes there. So, you know, the wine brought them there, but they would also pick up other goods, including salt. They would bring the wine back to Holland. Often though, the wine wouldn't make the journey. You know, just being wine, it goes bad at a certain point. So the Dutch started to distill it, and they found that once distilled, this burnt wine, with the addition of some botanicals and some water, really created like a drink that they enjoyed. But they also realized that shipping wine that far, you can really excuse me. Once wine is distilled, obviously, into a spirit, it takes up a lot less space. So it made more sense to move distillation from Holland to the Cognac region. That way they could ship more of the product and it'll take up less space on the boat. So in the beginning of the 17th century, double distillation started in the Cognac region. And this, you know, they found that over time, when the wine shipped in the barrels also, that it matured and it got better with age and with the oak influence from the cooper, from the barrels. Going into the 19th century, that's when the cognac industry faced a huge problem, and that was phylloxera. I think most people have heard of phylloxera, but maybe, you know, you're not entirely sure what it is. It is a small weasel, or it's a type of aphid that attacks the roots of the vineyards and essentially sucks all the sap, which kills the plants over the course of a couple of years. One interesting thing about this is that a lot of people believe that this aphid was actually imported into cognac due to plants coming over from the New World. There was the vineyards were being hit with this kind of mildew, this type of mushroom that attacks the vines, and it wasn't terribly problematic, but they wanted, they tried to figure out how to get rid of it, so they imported some plants from the New World, and it is believed that the phylloxera came over with that. First big outbreaks started in the late 1860s and started spreading through the vineyards in France. In the early 1870s, some French horticulturists went to the New World and looked for vine stocks that were resistant to this. They found some, they brought them back to France, planted them, and although this rootstock was resistant to the phylloxera, it was not suitable for the type of soil that is in the Cognac region, which is very chalky, clay, limestoney soil. So they, the first attempt to get rid of the weasel, it worked, but not great. So thankfully, the cognac houses had decades, at least, some say 20 years worth of cognac stocks in their houses. So they had a little bit of time to work on this and try and figure out the problem. But those deep stocks are really the only reason why, cognac wasn't completely decimated during this period. So, that gave them some time to figure out the problem. In the late 1880s, they went back to America and started searching for rootstock that would be more adaptable to the type of soil in France. They went through the southern part of the United States and traveled thousands of miles looking for, soil that mimicked the soil content in the Cognac region. Eventually, they found it in Texas, of all places. They worked with a man named Thomas Munson of Denison, Texas, and he was really knowledgeable about all the native plants and in Texas, and helped them find native rootstock in Texas that did really well in a limestone, clay, and sand, sandy soil that is true to the region of Cognac. So who would have thought that it was Texas that helped save Cognac from this problem? And then, early 1900s, we started working in, getting into the AOC, where the rules started coming about production, age, delimitation region, and just getting the crews all established. So that's just a brief little history. We got the as you can see here from the map, with different colors for the different regions. The dark orange there in the center, that's going to be the Grand Champagne region. That is, generally the most sought after area by some people. Just below it to the south, it's a little more orange. That's going to be Petite Champagne. And just above it, the lighter orange, that's going to be Bordeaux. And then the dark green, you have Finois. And then the light green outside of that, Poinbois. And the lighter green towards the ocean there is the Bois Ordinaire. And, production kind of, as it gets away from the center of Cognac, the less grapes are produced. So in that Bois Ordinaire region, it's vineyards mixed with forests and other crops, whereas in the middle there in Grand Champagne, Petit Champagne, Bordeaux, it's only grapes being grown in that region. The largest area is going to be Finois at 35,000 hectares. The main difference in the areas, they all kind of have the similar types of soil, but out more towards the ocean, you get a lot more of sandy soil, and as opposed to a more clay, thicker, chalkier soil in the Champagne region there. And that obviously has an effect on the wine produced and the eau de vie produced, and there's different terroirs to these regions. You can go to the next slide. So Cognac is strictly regulated by two labels: the GI, the geographical indication, which is just more of a European thing, and then the AOC, which is the French level. So when you think of AOC, you can think of Cognac, Champagne, Armagnac, things like that. And there are specific rules and regulations to how everything is produced, which is one of the reasons why Cognac is known for being, and has always throughout history been known as a high quality spirit, just because of all the rules and regulations that they have to follow for it to be called Cognac. So Uni Blanc. Uni Blanc, there are several types of grapes that can be used. You have Uni Blanc, Colombard, Foy Blanche, Montil, Fournion, Semillon. But 98% of the production these days is Uni Blanc, and the main reason for that is after the phylloxera epidemic, when they were grafting rootstock, the Uni Blanc just did so much better. It just thrived so much better with this grafted rootstock that the farmers at the time were trying to save their livelihood and just planted as much of that as they could, and that's why to this day the majority of cognac, almost all of it, is Uni Blanc. And Uni Blanc also, when you make it into a wine, it makes a high acid, low alcohol wine, which is what most distillers want when they're making eau de vie for cognac. That low alcohol allows for a lot of the favorable aromas in the wine to be kept, and the high acid makes it so it holds better between the time of winemaking and distillation, which can be several months. All the wine has to be pressed by the end of October, and then all of that wine that is made has to be distilled by March 31st of that same year. So all the distilling is done in just a few months there. So we can go on to the next slide. The Chantray's distillation. It takes 9 liters of cognac to make 9 liters of wine to make 1 liter of cognac. There are about 5,000 boilers in the cognac region. We can probably go on to the next slide now. So here's the basic setup. You have the boiler. I think we're all pretty familiar with basic distillation. In cognac, there's going to be two distillations. The first one is called the brewery. All the alcohol is retained. There's no cut. It's start to finish. This sometimes can take up to 24 hours for the first distillation to happen. It is a wood-fired it is a wood-fired still, which is not something you see much these days. Very traditional method. So that first pass takes a whole day. One thing that I found very cool when I was visiting there is, you have a certain number of distillers in the region, but many of these distillers have multiple stills. And when I say multiple, it could be dozens, because there's a limited amount of time for the distillation to happen. So they are distilling 24 hours a day. Often these distillers are sleeping on site because of how long it takes to have one of these runs. You see here the wine preheater in the middle. That is essentially you're warming up the next batch that's going to go in the boiler, and it kind of speeds up the process a little bit. And then the second run of distillation is called Le Bon Chouffe. This is where the cuts are made. You got the head, the hearts, the seconds, and the tails. Everyone does things a little bit differently. Most often the tails are tossed. Sometimes they might be put back, but the seconds are usually back set to a second distillation, and the heads often sometimes tossed, and really the heart is what most people are looking for here. And then from there, it goes straight in the barrel. And go on to the next slide, please. So just a little video of a distillery. There you can see the multiple stills and coming off the still at about 70 degrees. You can go on to the next slide. So aging and blending. One thing about cognac, there's many things about cognac that set it apart from other spirits, and aging and blending, I think, is one of them. There's a lot of, obviously these distillers are making beautiful eau de vies, but every cognac house has its own specific style, its own specific flavor profile, And these are all kind of determined by aging and blending. The master blenders of these cognac houses are really the ones that kind of make the magic happen, if you will. Oak casks, it is exclusively French oak. And, you know, when we think of oak barrels, you know, a lot of us are familiar with the process for bourbon, but with cognac, it's a little different. There's a couple different kinds of oak they use. Some of it's natural, some of it's from orchards. Often the wood is at least 90 years old. I mean, 90 to 100 is kind of the optimal age for a tree. That way it has the specific grain structure that they're looking for. And, you know, sometimes these trees can be 120 years old. And the barrels are toasted, but they're not charred, you know, and that's a very, I think, important distinction. Even the heaviest toasting is not even close to, say, the lightest charring you would get in a bourbon barrel. Also, these barrels, the staves are made, they're split, they're not cut. And, you know, going to a French cooperage is a very unique experience. You know, the different, you know, cutting as opposed to splitting. If you're cutting a log, you can, you know, with lasers and computers, figure out exactly how many staves you can get out of that log. But when you're splitting it, you know, it really is more of a, it's more of a master craft for the wood splitter to be able to get as many staves out of there. And, you know, they're splitting the wood in a way where they're separating it naturally. So you have you'll see these two different types of, you have the wide grain and the fine grain. The wide grain usually gets a longer toasting, and there's going to be more interaction with the grain in when it's wide as opposed to when it's fine. So you'll get more of the wood interaction with the eau de vies. And these are generally trees that are planted in natural forests, whereas the fine grains are more orchards. You know, and you can see these when you're taking the train to Cognac. You'll see these orchards, and they're French oak, and the trees are planted pretty close together. That way they can, you know, grow taller and not wider, and then that creates that finer grain, which they're looking for. And if we want to go on to the next slide. So yeah, like I was saying, the aromatics from the wood, you know, the toasting brings out all these delicious compounds, you know, vanillins, eugenyls, and those will impact the eau de vie over time. And, you know, one interesting thing about the aging process is, you know, it may start off in a new barrel, but it might only be in that barrel for a year, maybe 2 years, maybe less than a year, until the eau de vie has as much influence as the master blender is looking for. And from there, they will transfer the eau de vie to another barrel. And there's this constant moving and diluting and blending as you go throughout the years. And that's, you know, another thing I think that's very unique to Cognac. And how they're constantly, you know, moving around the barrels one to the next. And there's also two different types of aging warehouses. They're referred to as shays, and there's the dry cellar and there's the humid cellar. In a dry cellar, it's about 40 to 60% humidity, and the evaporation affects the water. So the water is evaporated, and you know, these aging warehouses produce a drier eau de vie that, you know, has maybe a bit more character than, say, the humid cellars, where, you know, the humidity is 80 to 100%. And, you know, in that situation, you see the loss of alcohol in evaporation as opposed to the loss of water. And, you know, if you've ever been in aging warehouse, you know, any spirit, it's a pretty awesome thing. You walk in and just, you know, the aroma in the room is just fantastic. And in Cognac, there's actually there's like a mildew that you'll see kind of on the outsides of the aging warehouses that is actually very specific to that region, and it feeds off the angel share, which, you know, I just thought that was kind of cool. So yeah, if you want to go on to the next slide. So over time, different qualities and different flavor profiles will come out of, you know, will be released from the eau de vie. You know, in the early years, you see kind of like the spice notes and, you know, floral notes. Violet is a very common flavor profile that I get when I'm tasting cognacs. And then, you know, 10 years, 20 years, 30, you know, around 30 to 50 years, you start seeing all these more unique flavor profiles, often referred to as rancio, and some crazy stuff starts to come out, like, you know, leather, cigar box, sandalwood, but also, you know, tropical flavors like passion fruit and lychee, and rancio is one of those things that's kind of, it can be a little difficult to describe, but when you taste it, you kind of know it. And, you know, with cognacs, you have the different age designations, you know, 2 years, 4 years, 10 years. But, you know, those are minimum ages. And when we talk about blending in cognacs, you know, a VS could very easily have 10, 20-year-old cognac in it, or eau de vies. And, you know, a XO very definitely, you know, very likely has cognacs that are 30, 40, 50 years old. So it's, you know, it's really, like I said, going back to the techniques of the master blenders and the cellar masters, and you know, blending all the different eau de vies to create that final flavor profile that they're looking for. All right, we can go on to the next. Yeah, as you can see here, the angel share represents 31 million bottles a year, which is you know, really pretty crazy. You know, when it comes to markets for cognac, the United States is actually the largest market for cognac. Over last year, I think it was over 103 million bottles were exported in 12 months, which is really, you know, quite significant. And then after that, it goes, I think Singapore might be the second largest market for cognac, which when you look at, you know, the size comparison between the two is pretty astounding. And then I think it goes like Asia, you know, excuse me, China, and then different parts of Asia drink quite a lot of cognac. And we can go on to the next one.
Il faut imaginer ces eaux de vie à travers un long vieillissement, ce qu'elles sont aujourd'hui et ce qu'elles éventuellement elles peuvent devenir. Donc il faut une vraie humilité face à ce travail discret de ces eaux de vie. Parce qu'on n'est jamais sûr du résultat.
All right, that's a cool little video, just some cognac there. All right, so we're a little behind here, but, you know, we can, oh, someone was asking if it was water evaporating in the humid cellar. No, in the humid cellar, it's alcohol because there is so much water in the air. You know, it's 80 to 100% humidity. These things are often kind of below ground level too. So when you go in them, you walk down and it's, you know, it could be a dirt floor. And I mean, it is very humid in there. But in that instance, it is the alcohol that's evaporating because there's so much water in the air. Cognac pairings, talk about these real quick. There's an app that the BNIC put out that we encourage you to download and check out. It's got some kind of classic cognac pairings. For me, the one that kind of always blew my mind when I visited Cognac was cognac and cheese. That's just not something I really thought about much, you know, spirits and cheese, but it works really well. And one of my personal favorites is just like oysters and like a pork rillette with some cognac. You know, but yeah, we encourage you to download the app, and there's some recipes on there and some stuff worth trying. Go on to the next slide. Here you'll see the aroma wheel. This was kind of developed with, I think it was a group of 120 bartenders and spirits professionals went through and a few days of tasting and tried to pick out all the different flavor compounds that people can find in cognac. And if you want to check that out a little more, and also just in general, the BNIC's website is really, really quite amazing. You know, I went over the history pretty quick today and stuff, but we encourage you to go check that out if, you know, if you want to learn a little bit more about cognac and you know, the stuff we're talking about today. We can go on to the next slide. All right, so for tasting, like we said earlier, or David here will.
In order to experience cognac's full range of aromas, we recommend to use a tulip glass, or if not, a wine glass. The funnel shape of the tulip glass opens outwards to gradually evade the aromas of the cognac without letting the alcohol overpower the overall impression. Fill your glass with several centiliters of cognac. There's no need to overfill your glass to awaken your senses.
All right, so as we go through the tasting here today, I hope, I don't know, one thing when it comes to tasting, for me personally, I really like to revisit spirits, even if you're just smelling them and getting the aroma as opposed to tasting them. So I have 8 different glasses here. If you have multiple glasses, I encourage you to do the same, because when I, you know, when we taste this first Frappin 1270 VS, I'll get certain things out of it. But then maybe when we go on to the XOs, and then if I revisit this one, I might pick out totally different flavors and aromas that the first time around I didn't quite get. So I encourage you, if you have enough glasses, to pour the taste and then kind of, you know, afterwards go back and smell the very, you know, compare them as you go through them. So we're gonna rip through these guys pretty quick. So yeah, this first one, VS. This is a single state, so it's all Grand Champagne. That region, you know, traditionally, you know, the eau de vie produced there have a lot of floral qualities. For me, in this one, I'm definitely getting, you know, I can't tell if it's, you know, maybe a little rose or violet, but dried fruit. You get that kind of classics, you know, spice, toasty oak. And remember, with tasting, it's always about 2 tastes. You know, get a little in your mouth, coat your mouth, and then, you know, you guys are a little bit later, 3 o'clock. I'm still noon here, so I'm going to be spitting, but one thing I really like about this one is you get I pick up some of those for such a young cognac. It has some qualities that you normally would find in a much older cognac. Maybe even a little bit of that, you know, leather and, you know, chocolatey cigar boxy stuff. So moving on to the next one, this is going to be the Cognac Macau. This is also their VS, so minimum age is maybe 2 years. The last one was going to be, it's all from the Grand Champagne region. This one is actually from all, it's a blend of all the different regions, which is, a little more common in a VS than a single estate. See, this one for me, I get a lot more citrus notes like orange, fresh orange peel, and maybe a little apricot and peach. Definitely get some rose tips on that last one. This one too has a much shorter finish than the last one for me. But very delicious. Next one we're going to go up is the Cognac Park. Now we're moving into VSOP category. So the minimum age of the eau de vie in this is going to be 4 years. But like we said earlier, the blend's going to have much older eau de vie in it. And this one's going to be 40% Fin Bois, 40% Petit Champagne, and 20% Grand Champagne. Getting a lot of citrus from this one too, like orange, some floral notes. On the palate, maybe a little date, and just a finish that just is nice and long and creeps and kind of evolves over time. All right, we can go on to the next one. Courvoisier, VSOP. Definitely one of the larger houses that I'm sure we're all familiar with. I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with some of these other ones, but we're actually tasting some things today that I haven't tasted before because I live in a control state and you can't get a lot of cognac here, unfortunately. Getting a little jasmine and peach on the nose. Maybe a little honey. The mouth is definitely going to be some spice, a little cinnamon, a little allspice. Definitely like a medium finish, kind of lingering. Some raisin notes on the end there. And yeah, the one tarragon, one thing about subjecting that, you got to realize, or excuse me, one thing about tasting, we all need to realize it's so subjective. We're all going to taste different things. Just because I'm getting one thing, doesn't mean you're going to get it either. But also, I find when it comes to tasting, like, it's good to familiarize yourself with aromas. Like, when was the last time, you smelled jasmine? Or I have a lot of botanicals in my bar lab that I go through and from time to time just smell. It definitely helps your tasting vocabulary, if you will. All right, so we can go on to the next one. This is going to be one of those kind of interesting, more kind of the new wave of cognac. There's so much history in this associated with cognac. A lot of the, some of these houses are older than our country. And a lot of them are, stick to tradition. They stick to their style. But then, in the last few years, in the last decade, we've seen a lot more kind of younger companies sprout up that do things like this one's going to be organic, and this one, you know, the 7 on the label refers to this is exclusively, excuse me, eau de vies, excuse me, aged 7 and 8 years, you know, and for them, that's just where they felt like they were ready to go. And so this one's going to be all Grand Champagne, so you're definitely going to get some of those more floral qualities, maybe a little fig. Very dry finish, very silky and soft on the palate. It's really quite delicious. And this is a company that for many years, like Park, just was a merchant. They distilled and they supplied exclusively to cognac houses, but then, you know, at a certain point decided they want to do their own thing, and started doing their own bottling, which I always think is very cool. Next up, we're going to go to the Hardy XO. You know, another one of the very old houses. This XO is, you know, only has to be 10 years, but this one's going to be minimum 20. This is all 20-year or older eau de vie. So this, you know, here's where we start seeing those kind of rancio qualities start coming out. You can get a little banana on this one, maybe some jasmine. And on the palate, this one is just it's just rich and very elegant, and the finish just keeps going and going and going. And that, you know, I believe, you know, that definitely comes from age. You know, this is you know, it's all 20-year aged, which I might have to swallow a little bit of that one. That one's a little too delicious to spit. All right, let's move on to the next one. Pierre Ferrand, Sélection des Anges, which is just means angel share. This one is going to be all Grand Champagne. So the nose definitely getting like golden raisin, a little chocolate in there. And some like candied fruit. Maybe a little dry cedar wood, and also a very long finish. Kind of opens up with some kind of tropical flavors at the end. So good. And then moving on to the last one. This one's going to be another kind of unique expression. Kind of a, you know, same thing with some of these, you know, with Park, and where they made cognac for other people for the longest time and then started doing it on their own. One cool thing about, you know, several cool things about this. First of all, it's vintage. This is all distilled in the 94 harvest. zero additives to this. And it's also, you know, most cognacs you'll find are 40% ABV. They don't have to be. That's just kind of always, you know, they can't be below that. But this one's actually clocking in at 52.8. So it's because it's a single cask, you know, and that's what the cask strength was. But that's just, you know, not something you see all the time, like both the vintage or the higher ABV. So this is definitely, you know, I'm very excited to try this one. First, I almost get some almost whiskey-like qualities to it. I don't know if that's just the higher ABV, but there's like brown butter and saffron, maybe a little, definitely some toffee in there. It's got a nice viscosity to it. Excuse me. Maybe a little leather and nutmeg on the end there. Very, very delicious. Yeah, I can see that. Some warm qualities. All right, so yeah, and after this, if you did have the ability to pour these in a bunch of different glasses, I encourage you to go through and just nose them all like one by one and kind of go back through them, and you'll really, I think, pick up a lot of different flavors and qualities that maybe you didn't taste or smell the first time around. So yeah, I encourage you all to do that if you can. And so now we're gonna make a quick cocktail here. Excuse me while I'll do a quick poll first. Cognac and tonic is something that I think a lot of Americans don't think about, but very common in France and very delicious. I encourage you to give it a taste sometime. First time I had it, I was kind of like, oh, that's different, but it works. And yeah, no love for the Champs-Élysées. That's a good one too. All right, so for the cocktail that I made today, it's going to be, you know, just kind of a refreshing highball style drink. We're gonna start off with just a bar spoon of ginger syrup, so 1/8 of an ounce, and 3/4 ounce of chamomile syrup. So for this one, it's essentially chamomile. There's a little bit of angelica, steeped for 20 minutes, and then it's made into a 1-to-1 simple syrup after straining. We're doing 3/4 of an ounce of that. We have an ounce of lemon juice, and then 2 ounces of our VS cognac. And this one I am using the Frappin 1270. Exciting! I haven't made a drink in weeks because my bar's been closed. We got a little champagne. Add that into the tin so it mixes up really well. Doing 1.5 ounces of that. Top it off with some ice. I'm gonna grab my garnish here. Just gonna garnish it with a little lemon slice and some mint sprigs. And You can also just shake it. If you didn't have ginger syrup, you could just shake it maybe with a couple slices of ginger. That would get the effect, I think. But yeah, call it the Three Towers. It's a bit of a Lord of the Rings reference, and also a reference to Frappin. At a certain time in the 1800s, they completed their chateau and added 3 towers to it. So that's why we named it that. So it looks like we got a few minutes here left for a Q&A. I don't know if anyone has any questions. Looks like we got a couple. Okay, that's a great question. It's a two-parter, but what is the optimal serving temperature for enjoying cognac? Room temperature. I know there is, historically speaking, the snifter heated up, the warm cognac, but I think when you warm a spirit, like that is something that I don't encourage. And I think when you warm up any alcoholic spirit, you're really releasing a lot of alcohol vapors, and you're really gonna push to the side all of those delicate aromas and nuances that make the spirit what it is. So yeah, room temperature. And obviously, if you like stuff on the rocks, that's fine too. But a lot of food pairings I've had actually have been with frozen cognac, which has been interesting. That's definitely very popular in France, like putting cognac in the freezer and then serving it alongside food. Frognac, yeah, frozen cognac. So Rancio. So yeah, talking about Rancio. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's definitely, it's hard to describe exactly what Rancio is. It's kind of like umami, and it's something that comes out after extended periods of aging. It could be flavors of like wet leaves, flavors of mushrooms, as well as passion fruit and lychee, and it's this quality that just comes out after extended periods of aging, and it's really hard for me. It's hard to describe it, but I know it when I taste it. I know that. I don't know if that helps, but yeah, that's kind of how I think of Rancio. Was that all the questions, or? Yeah, definitely enjoy it with some cigars. Yeah, the Rancio with the wine with the same name is definitely different. But feel free if any questions come up. You can reach out to Cognac USA or even reach out to me, A_W_Robinson on Instagram, or you can send me a message at my bars. My bar is called Deadshot. Don't hesitate, send me an email or something if you want. Adam@Deadshot PDX. Be happy to answer any questions, or visit cognac.fr. It's their website, and it's really quite incredible. And yeah, I think that's probably gonna pretty much do it for us today. I appreciate you taking time out of your Wednesday and sipping on some cognacs with me, and yeah, listening to me talk about the history and whatnot. Have a great day, y'all. Stay safe, stay healthy, wear a mask, and cheers.